Welcome to Hammer Territory. It is always a pleasure to be with you, and it is always a pleasure, number one, to be with Stephen Tolbert. But when we have a guest, and we have one of the best when it comes to covering the Braves, Grant McCauley from 92.9 has been kind enough to join us. We are going to jump into all things with the Braves offseason. It's good to be back with you once again, Stephen. How have you been, sir?
What's up, buddy? Yeah, man, it's good to be back on with you. I know you were down for a lot of the holidays sick,
Yeah.
so welcome back to the land of the living. It's good to have you back on. And of course, we've got our guest, Grant McCauley. Grant, we very much appreciate the time to join us. And how you doing tonight, buddy?
Yeah, happy to do it. I wish we had more to talk about, like as in things that have actually happened, but I guess we can continue talking about things maybe we think will happen or hope will happen. But bottom line is, I think something is going to happen in the next, 34 days before the Braves show up down in Northport. That's my feeling anyway.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in, quite honestly. There's no need to beat around the bush. So obviously it's been a very cold winter. It's been a very quiet winter. It's been an unusually quiet winter. Grant, you've been around the entire Anthopoulos era. You know as well as anybody that he's typically very aggressive, very active in November. Usually he gets a lot of his to-do list done. You know, he finds deals early. So just to start out with tonight, how surprised are you that we are, coming up on the middle of January and not a single thing off the to-do list has been done yet? And are you at all, has the fact that it's been so long since a move or any move has happened, has that changed your outlook on how this offseason will potentially go?
Yeah, that's interesting because there's a lot of different things. Let me answer the first part of that, I guess, first. We'll go in chronological order. Yes, I am surprised that nothing has happened. And I don't mean like, trying to keep up with every other major move that's been made by the Mets and their Juan Soto signing or what the Dodgers seem to do, which is different than just about everybody's offseason, typically every year. They're kind of in some rare air, but you're right with Alex Anthopoulos. He does kind of like to get a couple of things knocked off that list. And, last year it was getting relievers re-signed with Joe Jimenez and with Pierce Johnson. Then, of course, we had the Chris Sale trade. Ronaldo Lopez signing was thrown in there. A whole bunch of things that happened by the time we got here a year ago. And for whatever reason, things have not come together the same this year. And I've talked to Alex a lot over the years. And, as you know, he's not somebody that's going to publicly put out there, well, we want to do this. And once we do that, then we're going to do this. Like that line or that list is not a linear progression. It's, okay, we got a whole bunch of things we need. We're going to start working on each one of them individually. And as they come together, we'll really put our winter where we want it to. They feel like they will. And I don't know if this is a case of they needed to do a little bit of moving and shaking to free up some payroll and to see where they were going to be and to see how some of the free agency was going to shake out. But I know from talking to Alex at the winter meetings that they had engaged in talks, for whatever that's worth, with free agents, with teams on trades. And I know that they're still working on it right now. But I don't think it makes anybody feel better about the fact that a lot of other teams, particularly in the division, are getting better. And it just doesn't feel like the Braves have done a whole lot outside of a bunch of minor league signings. And I don't think that's really what people were looking for out of this winter. When you think about the 2024 that they had, all of the injuries they had to overcome, the clear needs that they came into the winter with, which I talked about this a lot, is kind of a more specific list than I think at any time in the last 6, maybe 7 years. And I think that there are some things that they need to do in order to get the club where they want it and then hopefully get healthy and then maybe get back to feeling like the club that they were prior to everything they went through in 2024. So I know that's a long answer and it's a whole lot of stuff to unpack, but that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, Grant, the other thing that I'll say about this that I don't think is talked about, maybe, I don't necessarily know enough, but you start to look at it. We have seen Max Fried go to the Yankees. We've seen Charlie Morton go to the Orioles, Travis d'Arnaud and Jorge Soler Angels. Now, AJ Minter potentially in conversation with the Red Sox. We are seeing our last connections to that 2021 World Series all go in one off season. And we're now 3 disappointing playoff appearances away from that 2021 World Series. I think that's a theme that may not be talked about enough. And that, like, it really is kind of a reset this off season, especially from what 2024 is. There's going to be, yes, a lot of production on the field that hopefully the Braves will fill in the rest of the off season, but also in that clubhouse, there's going to be a lot of new leadership opportunities. And again, it just kind of feels like naturally we're getting into a new new era of Braves baseball. And that's something else that I think as we, get into spring training and start the season, that's when I really think it's going to hit home about just how much talent the Braves have lost, but notable names the Braves have lost as well, especially connecting to that 21 World Series.
Yeah, I think it's always a balance. I mean, we knew with the way that baseball and sports is in general, like you can't keep an entire team together for a long period of time. And what the Braves have done, I mean, is commendable to have a core that they do have with the guys who are signed to long term, to know that you have a viable roster or a viable core to build your roster around. Unfortunately, for some of these guys that left, it didn't work out. We don't need to rehash the Freddie Freeman saga. I don't think Dansby Swanson, I believe, priced himself out of what the Braves were looking for at shortstop. Max Fried got a deal that I did not see out there for Max Fried. So congratulations to him. I mean, that's a tremendous contract for him, but it's not one that I think the Braves were A, willing to give, and B, I don't think it's one that a whole lot of people can look at and say, I can't believe the Braves didn't give Max Fried 8 years and $218 million. But when you get into free agency, the whole paradigm shifts. But the Travis d'Arnaud move, not bringing him back, not picking up that option, that I think signaled one thing. I don't think any of us were surprised to see them move Jorge Soler just because of the fit and what they might be looking for and looking to do this offseason. But that second part hasn't happened. And then you kind of look at, I think, the whole 2021 departures. I mean, obviously the Freeman one and the Swanson one and now the Fried one. Those are some pretty big ones. But there's several other names, including Jorge Soler, Adam Duvall, Eddie Rosario, Tyler Matzik, Luke Jackson, AJ Minter, Charlie Morton. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other guys that suited up for the Braves in 2024 that are probably not going to be back in 2025 or have already found a new home. AJ Minter, another one among those. I don't know if I threw that in there, but that hasn't really been decided. We know it's going to look different. It's always going to continue to be kind of a fluid situation every winter as to what you're going to add and obviously what you're going to lose. But I think from a sentimental standpoint, maybe an emotional standpoint, it stings a little bit more because you know what that group was able to accomplish. And then you kind of think about it, or at least I do. 2021 was not the best Braves team that we've seen in the run of division title winners that they had, or really even maybe among the best Braves teams we've seen since the start of the 90s. But they got the job done in October. They got hot at the right time, as the saying goes. And, I don't know what the simple math or the simple answers are for it, because the Braves, they got to figure out a few things when they get to October. I mean, that's really what they got to fix. They've been a pretty good team during the regular season, maybe even a great team during the regular season, but they got to find their answers come October. And one of those things, and I'm going to continue to beat this drum more so than the starting pitching, they got to figure out how to score runs again.
Here's my problem with grocery shopping. I don't want to waste precious time in life making the trip to the store, and I've got food allergies that make my in-person experience even more of a challenge. Those problems are now gone. Introducing Hungryroot to the FT fam.
Now we can all be bougie with our own personal shopper to handle the food shopping, including recs based on what you're looking to put in your body.
Just say, hey, Hungryroot, here's what I'm looking for, and they load up your cart with personalized recommendations. And those recs keep evolving as they learn about what you're into.
You're going to love Hungryroot as much as FT does. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. Get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/FT and use code FT. That's hungryroot.com/FT, code FT to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/FT, code FT. Get after it, FT fam.
Yeah, it's been an underrated part, honestly, is that the offense has disappeared 3 postseasons in a row. And, injuries were obviously a part of 2024, but 2024 was not an isolated incident. So I am curious, and that kind of leads to my next question for you, Grant. You and I were talking about this on Twitter a couple of days ago, and we had a lot of people interacting, a lot of responses to this. But one of the questions I've been trying to figure out is, okay, if the Braves do have some financial concerns, and that's been brought up, Justin Toscano, who was on with Brad and Scott a couple of days ago, brought this up. Other people have talked about it, that there's potentially some financial concerns for the Braves this offseason, and maybe they won't be able to do everything they wanted to do. And the big needs that we've talked about all offseason is left field, shortstop, starting pitcher, relief pitcher. And relief pitcher became even bigger when Joe Jimenez got hurt, and probably is going to miss all of 2025. So I'm going to ask you, in a hypothetical world where the Braves maybe do have some financial concerns and aren't able to address all of these, if you were GM, if you were Alex Anthopoulos, where would you prioritize? What would you go get? What would you make sure you had to have before opening day out of those big needs that we've talked about? What's the one that you think absolutely has to be addressed before we get to spring training?
I really feel like it's the starting pitcher first, the outfielder second, the relief pitcher. Maybe you could say it's a toss up with the outfielder because I believe Ronald Acuna Jr., barring setbacks, is going to be back sooner than later. I think he's back sooner than Spencer Strider, but that's just my guess and kind of how I'm reading the tea leaves of, what Spencer Strider is going through as a pitcher and what Ronald's going through as a position player and somebody who's, able to, I think, come back and affect the game a little bit sooner and there be maybe a little bit less concern than getting your elbow all but reconstructed. But putting that aside, I do think that that's the order that you want to go in because one more proven starting pitcher to me would really alleviate a lot of the worry about losing Max Fried and Charlie Morton combined. I mean, that post we were talking about, and I wrote about this in the Marietta Daily Journal about a month ago, it's 340 innings and about 60 starts that you lost with Max Fried and Charlie Morton. And while, it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride for Morton, and there were some injury concerns here and there for Max Fried, overall, pretty consistent. And those are things that you've got to be able to address. The return of Spencer Strider is going to help, but when exactly that's going to be is a question. I think that there are some internal options that might have a little bit more upside than others. Grant Holmes, I felt like, showed a lot. He got talked about by Alex Anthopoulos. Certainly, that's not plan A for how you want to address Max Fried and Charlie Morton leaving, but I do think he's earned the opportunity to show what he can do and to contribute to this club. And you're going to need more than 5 starting pitchers over the course of the season. But whether it's AJ Smith-Shawver or somebody else that could step in, Ian Anderson perhaps, maybe Bryce Elder. I know nobody wants to talk about the last two maybe of those who are kind of on their last legs as Braves in terms of they're out of options. So if they can't factor in spring training or factor early in the season, are they even going to fit at all? So I feel like putting all that together tells me that they need to get somebody who's a little bit more stable and perhaps somebody that could really factor into their postseason rotation if you needed them to, because weirder things have happened at the end of the year, whether that's Max Fried and Spencer Strider getting hurt and then Charlie Morton getting hurt, or it's, Max Fried was sick as a dog, I guess, that one year. And then he had to deal with a blister injury. So that happened a couple of different times. And then Chris Sale's back spasms. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. So the quantity and the quality of that, I think the Braves want to really add to. But as far as the outfielder goes, I think it's just somebody who's versatile that could help you out in left field, help you out in right field while Ronald Acuna Jr. is out, and still factor in some way, shape, or form a meaningful way in what the Braves are doing. But with no AJ Minter and no Joe Jimenez, I can't imagine that the Braves aren't trying to figure out that relief thing because I feel like they need one more leverage arm there too.
Grant, if you go back a year ago, I think that many would consider the Braves to probably, have been the best team on paper entering into the 2024 season. And I think that when you look at the team as itself, that was certainly the case. But then you had Spencer Strider coming off the year he did in 23 and Ronald Acuna Jr. coming off the year he did in 23. Those set us apart, I felt. Those were what I feel really set us aside, as being, the true favorite going into last year. Then, of course, both of them have season-ending injuries. You heard good things about their recoveries. Ken Rosenthal talked about it, how, maybe their recoveries being better than the Braves have expected. Maybe that's kind of, impacting what they're going to do this offseason. But I want to take it a step further. We expect both Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. to be back, I would think, before mid-May, both of them. But them being back to them being Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr., that's what this team really needs. Do you think that that's not being spotlighted enough? That them being back is perfect. It's great. It's awesome to see them on the field, but being at the superstar level that each of them, we're used to seeing them, I don't think that's going to be immediate. I think that there should be more put on that it's going to take time for those two to really get back to who they are.
Yeah, it's not a given. And we saw with Ronald in 2022. I mean, he had to deal with a lot of residual pain in that knee. And I think that's something that's going to factor into how he's worked over the course of the winter and looking to get back in and maybe listen to his body as much as he can. For Strider, I just feel like there's certain progressions you have to go through when you deal with the kind of elbow surgery that he's had. I know it wasn't Tommy John, so he is able to come back quicker than that. But I just don't know if the expectations can be where they were, certainly with what both of those players did in 2023. I think you're right about that. And I feel like as much as they can come in and make an impact, and I don't think people would be surprised, I just don't know if you can expect it to happen right out of the gate. And with the case of Acuna in 22, there's a lot of knowledge that he's able to take, I think, from his first recovery. You hate that he had to go down this road again, but maybe that'll help him out come the second time. But even when he was healthy in 2024, it was a really slow start for a couple of months. And I've watched Ronald play for a long time. I feel like he was going to figure it out eventually and somebody was going to pay, but then it didn't happen, couldn't happen because of the knee injury. So you've got to have, you can't have as many plan B, plan C, plan D, plan the entire alphabet that they needed a year ago. But I do think the Braves want to have more quality depth, whether that's in pitching or whether that's an extra outfielder that can help them out, because they really got caught, I feel like, in the crosshairs of one of the worst injury years I think I've ever seen last year. And I would prefer, as I'm sure many Braves fans would, to never see that kind of thing happen again.
So I'm going to ask you this, and you can ask 10 different people and they'll give you 10 different answers. But just like Justin the other day with Brad and Scott, you cover the team. I think your opinion matters a little more. So I want to get your opinion on this. So the thought has been out there that there are some financial concerns, like I was talking about earlier, that the Braves are potentially worried about the first tier of the luxury tax. As we sit here today, the Braves sit at about $195 million in terms of cash payroll, and then their luxury tax is about $217, give or take a small margin of error there, which means they have about $24 million before they get to the first tier, which is at $241 for 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you, do you feel like that staying below that tier and resetting the tax is something that Alex is seriously considering? Do you think it's playing a role in the quiet offseason we've seen? Do you think it's more to do with how hot the market has been and Alex just not being able to find a deal? Where do you come down on this kind of financial debate that's been going on all offseason?
I feel like the market's the biggest factor in that, because you don't want to just go over it to say, hey, we went out and did something. And the reason I say that is, and I talked to Justin about this back at the winter meetings last month, there was a story that Alex told us the first year that he came over, and Justin obviously just joined the beat a couple of years ago, but Alex was talking about his first year as a GM of the Blue Jays. He had a little bit of extra money left at the end of the winter, so he decided to spend it on a closer, and I cannot remember if it's Francisco Cordero or some other just veteran journeyman closer, and it just didn't work out. He wasn't very good. And then in season, he didn't have the flexibility, and I know that's a popular term to talk about, to go out and financially do what he wanted to do at the trade deadline for the Blue Jays that year. It ended up hurting him. So unless he's convicted in a move and really feels strongly about it, he's not going to do something just to do it. He's going to wait, bide his time, and try to find the right deal. And I think he does want to leave the wiggle room to be able to do some stuff in season. As far as the luxury tax goes, I don't think they're trying to stay under it just to stay under it to reset it. I think that it has more to do with what exactly the moves could be that would push them over that. And I don't think they mind the first tier. It's just when you start to get beyond that to those next levels of it, where they want to try to avoid being one of, I guess, the top paying luxury teams in all of baseball. So that's kind of the way I read it. That is how I interpreted what Alex Anthopoulos has told us those couple of times. I feel like $24 million is not nothing, but I don't know if it's going to get you a starting pitcher, an outfielder, and a reliever. And I've kind of left shortstop out of all of this, not to turn it into a whole nother discussion, but I just don't see shortstop as big of a need if other things on the team are going right. And that may not be a popular opinion either, but that's just kind of the way I look at it. If you've got healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. and the rest of your lineup, the Rileys and the Olsons and the Murphys of the world hitting, I don't think you're as worried about what Orlando Arcia is doing down in the 9 spot. But again, he ended up with the bat in his hand an awful lot in 2024 in places where maybe he could have helped out with the Braves when they really needed him to step up. But again, we don't know what 2025 is going to look like, but the whole thing is just kind of, I think we're getting caught up in maybe the numbers and the lack of moves and starting to wonder if maybe it's more than it is as far as the luxury tax is concerned.
Yeah. So you mentioned shortstop, and I think most of us have, other needs just popped up ahead of, the relief pitcher thing with Joe Jimenez popped up kind of out of nowhere. I think it popped up out of nowhere for the team as well. They still, AJ Minter is still out there, the Tanner Scott stuff, which I'm going to get your opinion on here in a second. But are you cool with one more year of Orlando just because of the other needs? I know Ha-Sung Kim is still out there. That's basically the only free agent on the market that would be an upgrade over Arcia, and I've just been kind of waiting for him to sign somewhere else so I can officially mark shortstop off my list.
Mm-hmm.
Are you cool? If Scott Coleman was here, he would have a heart attack. But are you cool with one more year of Orlando Arcia? Or do you feel like it's time, the Dansby thing, They really haven't found a replacement since Dansby left. Do you think it's time to go at shortstop, or are you cool with one more year?
I feel like, the interpretation of being cool with and being accepting of that, if those other things are in place, I think I'd fall more into the latter. I mean, if Orlando Arcia is able to do what he did in 2023, I'm okay with it. But if Orlando Arcia is going to hit 220 and be historically bad with runners in scoring position, I don't think anybody, myself included, wants to watch 162 more games of that. So could that be the thing that maybe they try to address if some of the other needs won't fall in place? Maybe they pivot to shortstop. And this is kind of just building off of what Alex talked about in 23 when the Braves had the historic offense and everybody was excited about what was happening every night with this club because they were just, setting home run records and doing all the big things. He was out there at the trade deadline trying to find arms. Then all of a sudden he was looking at adding maybe one more bat, which I thought in hindsight was crazy. Obviously it didn't happen, but that was the way he was thinking. He was like, well, maybe we'll just take a strength and make it even stronger. Now, this would not be making shortstop even stronger and dealing from a place where you already have a strength. I think they do need a long-term answer there. But when you consider what Orlando Arcia did in 23, what he does in terms of the payroll, which is not a small thing. I mean, it's a small salary, but it's not, as you start to put together the math and figure it all out, it could play a role in that. And I think all of these things are kind of connected. So I go back to it and say it again. I feel like there are different levels of need in certain areas that to me just surpass shortstop. But if it continues to be a problem, then maybe they will revisit that when it comes time, if they can either find the right deal for a shortstop or maybe in season the right trade is out there and the Braves are able to make that move then.
So, Grant, the other thing that, in talking about, current players on the team, I think if you were to rank the top 3 MVPs of the 2024 season, Chris Sale, Marcell Ozuna, Raisel Iglesias. Of course, all three of them, you could say each of them had career years in 2024, but they also have another common thing. They're each entering or are already in their mid-30s. You do have, Ozuna and Iglesias who are going into contract years, but just your thoughts, all three of them thankfully are having healthy off seasons, but there's always that risk when you have them having such big years in their mid-30s. Could they also potentially be coming to that, theoretical, that figurative cliff? What are your thoughts on them, and that if any of them were to naturally regress because of age in 2025, that's no small thing. What are your thoughts about each of them, hopefully, having big seasons again in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like all of these guys are capable of following up their years. I mean, I'm not going to tell you Chris Sale's going to win another Cy Young and have another Triple Crown. That's a pretty special season, but is he capable of going out there every 5th or 6th day, depending on how you do the math and how the Braves, I think, are going to do the math again this year with giving extra rest to some of their starters? I think he's in position to continue doing what he's done. Marcell Ozuna, I'm just never going to second guess the guy again, because he went from being one of the most easily, cut, traded, released, whatever you want to call it, players in the minds of most Braves fans by 2022 to a pivotal part of the offense for the last 2 years, and a guy they're going to be counting on again big time. So I wouldn't count him out in any way, shape, or form. And Raisel Iglesias is just, I think, an important part of that bullpen, would be putting it lightly. I think he was one of the best relievers in baseball last year, at least as far as ninth inning guys are concerned. And I think they're going to need that even more so heading into 2025. So hopefully none of them regress. I don't feel like they've gotten so far into their 30s that you have to worry about it being a steep decline. But I think as we saw in 2024, expect the unexpected can be a pretty bad thing when it comes to injuries, regression, or both in the case of the Atlanta Braves, because we saw Austin Riley and Matt Olson randomly struggling, regressing, whatever you want to call it. Some people would put it that way. I felt like it was just some prolonged struggles for them and for others, but those are the kind of things that can happen, and we don't know whose name is going to get called when it comes down to that as well. So I think you're counting on all those guys a lot, and I don't know if that's a real good answer to the question, but they need to do as much as they did in 2024 for the Braves to be where they want to be, I think, in 2025, or at least close to it.
Yeah, Iglesias being 1 year away from free agency, I think he's probably a sneaky good candidate for one of these blue box extensions that we've seen from Alex. It would not surprise me at all if they tried to lock him up some point this winter just to get some more clarity for the bullpen. But that actually leads me to my next question. We're going to let Grant go here pretty soon because we've already gone 25 minutes here. But the Tanner Scott stuff was out there. You saw it as well as we did. There's been real smoke. And for the Braves, we don't get a lot of smoke, quite honestly, on many names. So I didn't want to get you out of here without getting your opinion on the Tanner Scott stuff. Is that potentially a deal where they, give him 3 or 4 years as with the idea of him being the closer, if Iglesias does leave after 2025, do you think they might try to lock Iglesias up and have both of them? Where do you see the bullpen and specifically the Tanner Scott rumor that came across about a week ago?
Yeah, I think if there's one place the Braves have proven that they will spend, it is the bullpen. And Alex Anthopoulos said it last spring when I was talking to him. I never want to have to rebuild another bullpen at the trade deadline. It's stressful, and you just don't know if it's all going to come together. And remember, he had to do that quite a few years ago, 2019, I think, into 2020 as well, had some of those pieces that he picked up at the trade deadline. But I feel like with the signing of Will Smith after the 2019 season, they showed you that they will spend on a reliever in free agency, and they'll lose a draft pick if that's what it comes down to as well. So I feel like that's the one spot where I know the Braves catch a lot of flack, and unless or until they sign another big free agent deal of some other type, deserved or not, they haven't spent big on free agency except when it comes to relievers. And I'm interested to see if this Tanner Scott thing actually does happen. He would fit pretty well, I think. And I talked about this earlier on formerly known as Twitter about how I don't know if people realize how big of a loss AJ Minter could be when he goes somewhere else. And I know he's not healthy right now, but just look at the numbers and take that away from the Braves, what he's been annually. That's another arm that you're going to have to figure out. And that's beyond just losing Joe Jimenez for potentially the entire season as well. So that would lead me to believe that if they were going to spend a considerable chunk of the money that they have allotted for this winter, maybe a reliever does jump the line. But I think they also need to look at the rotation, quite obviously, like we talked about. So it's a good fit to me if they're able to get the Tanner Scott deal done and keeping Iglesias around for another year or two. I don't think that would be a bad deal either. I feel like it's just you want as much quantity and quality as you can have. And the 2021 postseason showed us a strong bullpen can carry you a long way. You got to score some runs, but that bullpen can really be a difference maker. And those are the kind of arms you need.
And Grant, you've hit on, I think earlier today you talked about the fact that in the World Series it may have been, or it may have been the entire playoffs, the Braves won, I believe, the World Series scoring 4.25 runs per game. I couldn't remember if the World Series or the playoffs as a whole. Doing that today is going to be very, very hard to do. Of course, at the beginning of the offseason, the talk was about, Kevin Seitzer going, elsewhere, us hiring Tim Hires from the Texas Rangers. What are your thoughts in terms of, we know the offense has got to get better, but at the end of the day, especially with us talking so much about arms, that's going to be the internal improvement, from Sean Murphy, hopefully Matt Olson getting closer to what he was in 2023, Acuna being healthy once again. How much faith, how much, confidence do you have that this Braves team is going to get back to not only, being a powerful offense, but an offense that's got some depth to it, one that can win in multiple ways? How confident are you on the internal improvements going into next year?
It's going to be critical. And I feel like maybe they got to this point where, and it was somewhat surprising to me, where they felt like the message needed to change. And sometimes in order to do that, you've got to go in and get a new voice that's going to be able to do that for you. And hopefully Tim Hires and the guys that he has brought in to work with him can bring some fresh ideas that may help some guys out. Now, I will say this, that we are in an age of like specialized coaching. I mean, every one of these players is going to go out and have somebody else helping them with their swing. It's not just a hitting coach anymore. Sometimes maybe it's a question of too many cooks in the kitchen. Maybe it's just too many things going on, pressing an awful lot. I talked to Austin Riley several times the first couple of months of the season, and he said, look, we know that we're pressing because we all want to be the guy that gets the hit, that turns around the game, wins the series, turns around our month, turns around our season, but we can't take that to the plate with us every single at bat. But Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., I mean, those are four names right there that you've got to get more out of in 2025 than you did in 2024. And I know injury played a large part, especially for Acuna, Albies, and Riley, but you've got to get more out of that four, and they are still very much in the prime of their career. So if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would think that healthy, they could put together the kind of numbers that you need for this offense to look maybe not like the 2023 version, but a lot better than the 2024 version. You just got to get those guys out there and give them the opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything else I can add from the past 30 minutes. Grant, you once again have shown why you're the best when it comes to covering the Braves. And I can confirm Grant is as kind and good a person in person as he is actually covering the Braves as well. The one or two times I've had the chance to meet Grant. But Grant, speaking of that, where can people find your work? I obviously know you contribute in a lot of different ways. Where all can people find your great work?
Well, hey, I appreciate that. And anytime you guys want me, I'll be happy to jump on here and give you as many of the answers that I can in an off season where we haven't gotten an answer to much of anything from the Braves just yet. But you can find me on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I host my show From the Diamond. That'll be coming your way on Sundays throughout the course of baseball season. You can also subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow my work on the Marietta Daily Journal. And I will be doing a lot of work on YouTube. Stay tuned. I'll be announcing everything that I've got going in 2025, but a lot of different outlets. FromTheDiamond.com has all the links on the top navigation. You can find me there.
You also obviously can find, as you can see from the Twitter/X handles for myself, Stephen, and Grant. That's where you can follow us on Twitter/X. You can follow us on YouTube, of course, Hammer Territory, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Grant, if you'll stick with us for just a second after the show, but thanks so much, and I have a very happy start to the new year to you, sir. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Yeah. For Stephen Tolbert and Grant McCauley, my name is Shawn Coleman. Always a pleasure being with you. You can check out all the great content from Hammer Territory. We're going to be here to cover it, even if there's no moves. The content never stops. For Grant and Stephen, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.